Boys and girls, welcome back to the Bokeh Podcast. I'm your host, Nathan Holritz. It is good to be here with you today. Happy Friday to you. For those of you that are live streaming with us, good to have you here. Would love for you to join in the conversation. You can comment, ask questions, throw us some funny emojis if you want to. I've got a really cool guest with me today. I'm going to introduce in just a second, and I want you to take advantage of the opportunity to ask questions on kind of a new topic for us here at the Bokeh Podcast. So I'll get to that here in just a second. Before I do, for anybody who is not live streaming with us, you're listening to this after the fact, make sure to follow us at Bokeh, B-O-K-E-H Podcast, and you can keep up to date with the upcoming live stream schedule. Come be part of these live streams, and again, take advantage of the opportunity to join in the conversation with our guests. And on that note, I do want to introduce a brand new guest here on the Bokeh Podcast. John DeMato is here with me. John, thanks for coming to do this. I truly appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me, Nathan. I'm excited.
Well, and I want to start the conversation with something that you and I were just chatting about briefly before we got started here, which is something that I think I just want to encourage all photographers listening in and watching with. You talked about the significance of this idea that we're all just kind of trying to figure it out at the end of the day. Like, it's easy to look at each other, whether it's from a political conversation or in business or in our personal lives, whatever the angle, and point out differences and find ourselves in conflict over those differences, when the reality is, at the end of the day, the base level, we're just human beings trying to figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, as I said to you, I wish that was the prevailing wisdom out in the world, because ultimately, at the end of the day, based on this journey I've had as a professional photographer and working as a television producer prior to that, I've seen a significant portion of this country, and it is a beautiful place. It is so diverse with the people, the culture, the landscape. There's so much here, and ultimately, when you go to these places, you have this this preconceived idea of what to expect based on what you've heard,
right?
And then you go there, and it's like, dude, no, we're all just there. We're all human beings. We're all trying to get through our day. We have all our own problems, and really, it's let's come together and figure it out. That's
and a lot of people write that off to being idealistic, but really at the very base level, it is what it is. It's just simple truth. And I do wish that we could kind of focus more on that versus the differences. Because, as much as we like to kind of, at least in modern culture, first world culture, like to build up how complicated and individualistic we are, we have so much more in common than many times we're willing to admit.
Yeah, and not only that, but I think what it really boils down to is you need to find the people that resonate with how you see the world and how you want to live in that world. And there are plenty of options out there in the world. So really, it's up to us to be able to find those that we gravitate towards, because they're of a like mindset, and it may be idealistic, but it is the way that I try to live my life, regardless of how you want to label it. I really don't care.
I'm right there with you. I'm an idealist. I'm a romantic. I can be a cynic if I allow myself to go there, but that's not a fun way to live life. And I'm going to fight for those ideals, and I think that's a good thing. I love that we were able to start the conversation that way, but I want to introduce your brand here to our listeners, to our community. So maybe if you don't mind just starting with that, talk just briefly about your brand, what it is that you're doing professionally.
Sure. So I'm a professional photographer who shoots people who speak on stages. They write books, they train, they coach, consult. They have online communities, they have online courses, podcasts. And my job is to basically photograph all of those different elements to be able to create a comprehensive image portfolio for them. And recently, I've dipped my toe in the water and kind of copycatted the people that I serve and become a trainer myself. And I train photographers currently to shoot branded lifestyle portraits.
Very cool. Okay, so as you were talking, I was popping up your website and social media, but we'll do this on screen here for anybody who might be live streaming. John DeMato, DEMATO.com. And then the same thing, well, actually similar, DeMato Photo on Instagram. And then Deliver Magic, your education side of things, Deliver Magic on Instagram. And we'll link to all of these, of course, in the show notes at bokehpodcast.com. And I'll continue to pop those up on screen as you're talking, though, John. Let's just kind of jump right into it because we got kind of a big topic to get into today. Before we do, I'd like to ask a couple of introductory questions here. The podcast is really geared toward helping photographers build sustainable businesses. And of course, a lot of what that's about is helping minimize burnout, enabling us as entrepreneurs to enjoy the freedom, the flexibility we can have as business owners. And I wonder if over the last number of years that you've owned your business, you've learned an idea, a principle that's enabled you to kind of find some balance between work and still having a life.
Well, the big thing with that is curiosity. And what I mean by curiosity is to be curious enough to explore different ways to enhance your productivity so that you can, in fact, get a lot done in a short amount of time. So then you can go do whatever else you want. Over the years, I've had the privilege of working with a lot of productivity coaches, photographing them, but you're also, working with them and gleaning a lot of information from them. And it's given me that inspiration to be able to say to myself, you know what, I've done this thing a certain way. It has taken me X amount of days. I'm completely overwhelmed by it. I feel like I want to push it to the side and ultimately, doing the same thing over and over and over again until ultimately you realize, you know what, I got to shake this up. I got to find a different way, a different approach, a different process to be able to get this stuff done. And that really has been a catalyst in my ability to be able to become far more productive with my time. So then I can go, watch Netflix on the couch and do nothing.
What's the favorite Netflix show right now?
Oh God, all of them. I love all the documentaries. I'm a big fan of that stuff. Yeah. I'm a documentary nerd. Yeah.
Are you? Okay. Speaking of, and I got to throw this out to everybody because most everybody I would assume listening in is a business owner of some kind. There is a documentary, not on Netflix, but on HBO about Richard Branson. Have you seen that one?
I saw most of it. Yeah.
It's fascinating. The backstory there, because it's easy to just kind of write the guy off, who's the billionaire, the crazy billionaire, whatever, however people want to kind of stereotype him. But the backstory is just fascinating and super inspirational too.
Nathan, I was just going to say that one of the reasons why I like watching documentaries specifically about titans of industry is the inspiration factor, because these folks were just like us, trying to figure something out. And in many cases, far deeper in the hole than a lot of the folks watching this and maybe ourselves. And yet they found a way to be able to overcome those challenges. And, every now and then when I watch those, I find myself afterwards jotting down ideas on Google Docs. It's like, I got to get my thing together. I got to get it together. How do we do this? How do we do this? They can do it. I can do it too.
100%. But that's actually a really great way to put it. When I think about the inspiration, I mean, I guess I could pinpoint 2 or 3 different things that are particularly inspirational about Branson's story, but you're absolutely right. Probably at the core of that is he was just like one of us, and you hear some of the struggles that he went through in order to get to where he's at. It really is inspirational. So we'll link to that in the show notes too for anybody who might be curious. But curiosity, I love that idea of curiosity, and I think that drives growth for us as individuals, as business people. It certainly enables us to be able to learn some of the ideas that encourage efficiency in our business. And I just want to encourage, speaking of encouragement, I want to encourage photographers to look for those opportunities to even streamline your business just a little bit, so you've got a little bit more freedom, a little bit more flexibility at the end of the week. But then part of what drives efficiency, of course, is in our first world culture, again, we have so many opportunities, so many choices, so many things that we could possibly do. And it can be very easy to get lost in all the choices, all the possibilities, when the reality is at the end of the day, there are a few core principles that drive a healthy business and successful business. I'm wondering over the years what you've learned as a key principle or idea that has enabled success for you as a photography business owner.
Well, when I first started, I photographed anything that had a paycheck attached to it. So there was the jack of all trades. I mean, if we really want to call it what it is, it was desperation photography. That's what it was.
Yep.
It was, please hire me. Please hire me. I'm here. Hi, I have a camera. I kind of know how to use it. Please hire me.
Kind of know. Yeah.
Yeah. But the thing that really kind of focused my business and allowed me to be able to be in a position to actually teach it is focusing on one audience, niching down, actually getting into that audience. Now, when I talk about niching, I don't just simply mean, I'm just going to go focus on this one group and then I'll shoot them and it'll be great. it's really getting to know these people. I mean, on a relationship based level. I mean, I say to my students, you want to be around people, clients that you actually would want to sit at a bar and have a conversation with. And those are the types of people that you would be willing to go through the ringer to deal with the ups and downs of running a business,
Mm.
because not only is it the type of photography that you want to shoot, but it's the type of people that you want to work with, period. And when you have those two pieces together, that really will drive you and propel you forward past all the speed bumps and hurdles that come across your way. Because guess what? There's a ton of them, and you
Yeah.
have no idea when they're going to come.
Hmm. We have talked about this idea of focusing, of niching down, of really putting our attention toward a specific market or sub segment of the market in the past. But I like the way that you frame that, which is it will actually enable us to sustain our business. I mean, again, we're Bokeh is about helping photographers build sustainable businesses. A sustainable business is driven in part by working with people that we actually want to work with. And that's actually one of the benefits, the potential benefits with niching down. A lot of photographers have FOMO on the idea that they are going to miss out on business if they only niche down. But the reality is, not only does it allow us to be able to build a business more efficiently, more quickly, but it also enables us to sustain that effort more effectively as well. I love that. I love that perspective.
And on top of that, when you become someone who is known as a go-to photographer in a specific marketplace, you become a specialist. And when you become a specialist, you get to charge more money. And when you get to charge more money, you don't have to shoot as much. I shot so much more
Mm.
6, 7 years ago than I do right now.
Mm-hmm.
Not because I don't have the opportunity to do so, but because I don't have to. And when we speak of freedom and time, this is another piece to that is very important, to be able to afford you the opportunity to have that time and flexibility with your schedule by becoming that specialist, and then being able to raise your rates and work with the people that you want to work with. As far as I'm concerned, in the game of life, you're playing with house money at that point.
Love it. Love it. Well, we're going to talk today about the significance of a strategy call pre-session, pre-portrait session, and how that improves client experience. And we talk about this a good bit here on the Bokeh Podcast, but client experience, more than ever, is at the root of a successful business. Photography, taking a good picture, even just a few years ago. In fact, there's still maybe a conference or two that you can go to now where you see people walking around with awards around their neck and kind of propping themselves up for winning photography-based awards. And I think there's some significance and value to being able to drive our technical ability as photographers. I don't want to minimize that. But the reality at the end of the day is most of our clients are just happy with a great picture, even a good picture, but more important to them is a really great experience. And you say that client strategy calls can help improve that experience. How do they do that if you were to sum it up?
Well, first of all, it shows that you care. I mean,
Mm.
before I started this process of creating a strategy call where I have 30 questions or whatever it is, and I'm on the phone with them for 90 minutes before the session, I would just have that initial email or phone call where, yeah, so we're going to meet up at the park. We'll meet on the corner, bring some outfits, we'll figure it out. And yeah, you get some stuff that's usable, and it's okay. But quite frankly, what I realized as I went down the rabbit hole with the experts that I serve, I realized they need a lot more than that. And I really needed to get to know who they were. I needed to know the tentacles of their business. I needed to understand their personality and help shape all of the stuff that goes within that session to make the session uniquely theirs, so that they don't end up with a portfolio of, 100, 200 photos where it's basically 10 photos repeated 10 times over,
Mm.
and
Yep.
and that was a huge problem in my work.
Mm.
It's a problem that I've seen in the industry. It's also something that I still see that happens continuously today, because I'm often hired to clean up messes that were made by other photographers because they didn't
Mm.
do the work beforehand, not because they didn't care. It's because they're not aware of how powerful a pre-session strategy call actually is to the success of creating a comprehensive image portfolio.
I got it. Okay. So I was just quickly taking notes then. So number one, it does communicate care. attention. Like you actually, excuse the French, but give a damn, right, about the person on the other side of the camera and how you're portraying them at the end of the day, how you're able to impact their business for the better, or impact their brand for the better. But then it also creates awareness. And that's really, really key. And we're going to get into how you go about doing that. But I'm curious if you differentiate for our audience. Some photographers listening in, they might be like, well, of course, there's a consultation before my session or before the event that I photographed. That's typical, isn't it, Nate? Or John, what's the difference between your typical consultation that a photographer might apply before the session and the type of strategy call that you're talking about?
Well, the difference is in the complexity of the questions and how deep you want to go down the rabbit hole to identify the nuances and wrinkles into what makes that person them.
Okay.
And when you have that level of specificity, it creates a very detailed shot list that you would not quite frankly get when you just simply talk to them for 5 minutes and figure out, the time and the date and the location. It's so different. And for the people that I serve, they are all over the internet. They're doing all different kinds of marketing and promotion, anything from online content to they need blog thumbnails to video thumbnails to montages to PDFs and printed materials and stuff for their books. I mean, the list goes on and on for my people. And it's not, specific to the expert-based business owner industry. This is something that translates to many service-based business owners, right? So it's our job to understand the person that's in front of that camera, not just because we need to get the image content, the specifics for the image content that they need for their portfolio, but you also need to get them to feel comfortable with how you are directing them, because at the end of the day, we're driving the car in this thing from the moment that they pick up the phone and call us to the moment that those photos are delivered. It is our responsibility. We talk about client experience, right? That is the client experience. It's not just during the session. It's the whole thing. And we have to be accountable and responsible the whole time.
It seems like the difference, if we were to sum it up, is logistics. So a lot of photographers, maybe most photographers, their so-called consultation before a shoot is about logistics. And what you're talking about is a lot more nuanced. You're going a lot deeper.
Yes. And not only that, I mean, we're talking about that stuff too, because the answers to these questions informs the logistics. It's not the other way around. It's not show up and figure it out. It's figure it out and then show up. And then that will ensure a greater level of success, which, by the way, the more successful the session, the more likely you're going to get referrals. The more referrals you get, the more sustainable your business is. It's not rocket science.
But you made a really interesting distinction there that I want to repeat for everybody listening in, new and established photographers. It's not show up and figure it out. It's figure out the details previous to the shoot. When you get to the shoot, knowing those details, having that awareness enables you just to focus on creating the best shoot possible.
And not only that, but it instills confidence in the photographer, because as you might know, sometimes you get a little nerves, little butterflies before a session. I still do. I still do. Why? Because I care. Because this is not just a business. This is my passion, my love, my art. And it matters to me. And it matters that I deliver a quality experience and quality results for the people that I serve, because they're paying me. And it's still crazy to me that I'm a professional photographer after all these years, by the way. I don't know if you feel the same way, but it's amazing. So I don't want to let them down. I don't want to let myself down. And the way we ensure that is by being crystal clear before the camera's out of the bag.
Well, I think that attitude that you're describing, it's made up of humility. It's made up of appreciation, of thankfulness. I haven't shot full time in quite a while, but I've photographed weddings for over a decade, and I still look back at that and I think how incredible that these people let me in their lives, and some of the most intimate moments of their lives, the most significant moments of their lives, allow me to be part of that. Even treated me like family a lot of times. Yeah. How lucky was I that I got to do that and get paid a significant amount of money for it as well. That's really, really cool. And if we lose that sense of appreciation and that humility, we become cynical and we become bored and we become grouchy and all the other things. I think it's important to lead with that humility and thankfulness. You make a wonderful point.
Yeah, and bless your heart for being a wedding photographer. That's a tough one.
It can be. It can be. But it really,
Sure.
truly, and I know it may sound cliche, but it was an amazing thing to be a part of not only the relationships that we developed through that process with these individuals and their families both, but then to get to watch that. I mean, I'm such a romantic, so I'm behind the camera like crying as I'm taking pictures of these photos, during the ceremony and so forth. It can be just a really incredible thing to be a part of. Also a lot of work.
It is, but it's creative and financially fulfilling. So,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what more do you need, really?
That's a great point. Well, let's get into, you mentioned before we got started, you mentioned to me that there are three kind of main sections, if you will, behind this strategy call or the
Yeah,
approach to the strategy call. Will you kind of walk us through that in some detail?
sure. So, as I mentioned, it's about 30 questions. Quite frankly, in most cases, I selectively choose the ones that I need based on how long the session runs. If it's a 2 hour session versus a 4 or a 6, obviously, I'm not going to be able to account for all those things. But
Sure.
just high levelly speaking, we start with the who are you questions. These are the ones that unearth aspects of their personality. It unearths their expertise, who they serve, not who they serve. That's in the next section, but it's more about why they do what they do. What are their motivations? Figuring out how they want to be perceived by their audience. I have questions based on that to get a couple of buzzwords out of them. I also have some questions based on aspects of their personality that they want to convey throughout the portfolio.
Okay.
And then the second piece is who they serve. So that's when I find out, what kind of audience are we dealing with, and that gives me a little more intelligence into the types of problems that they solve. And that's the third section. How do they solve their clients' problems? And that's where we get into what their business, the architecture of their business looks like. Are they coaches? Do they speak? Do they do one-on-one consultations? Do they do anything virtually? Have they written any books? Do they have online courses? All of these very, very, very in the weeds things, and these activities inform me, because as they're answering the questions underneath my, because I have a Google Doc with all the questions up top. I'm taking notes, and then at the bottom is the shot sheet. I have a template for that broken down into different sections, and then I'm filling that in as I'm hearing them. And then what we do is bounce back and forth with regards to the types of locations that would make sense to be able to capture these types of images.
Mm.
Along the way, I'm finding out about their wardrobe because, yeah, you need to know what they need, what they wear, So what they wear client facing, what they wear when they're by themselves working and brainstorming ideas and doing the behind the scenes work, because we do capture that as well. And with all of that stuff put together, I then go through the itemized list of the shot sheet with them, tell them how many outfits we need, and then give them options, whether I'm flying to them, to their location, wherever they live in the country. We figure out whether we're shooting in their house, their office, we're shooting in a co-working space, or if they're flying to New York, and then we figure out the logistics at the end.
Oh, I like that. So you don't even start with that. You start with these three sections of questions.
I want to know who they are. I
Yeah.
want to know I want to know their essence, essentially, and more importantly, I want them to know my essence and the way that I direct, and get that rapport started immediately. I joke with them in the way that I joke while I'm on set. Sometimes I have a little bit of a colorful mouth. So I
No
let them
judgment.
know about, yeah, yeah, yeah. But that's the thing. The part of qualification in the consultation call, that's the qualification period. Now, a lot of photographers feel like they're auditioning, when in fact, it's a two-way street. Qualification is a two-way street, because if I'm not getting the vibe that this is going to be someone that will respond positively to the way that I direct, I'm not even talking about the quality of the images. I'm talking about being in a room with this person for 2, 4, 6 hours. Can we stomach each other? Okay, check. Do they actually like me? Do I like them? Check. Then we can get into the stuff. It's so important to really lock that in at the beginning.
Okay, well, I want to come back to those three sections of questions, but before I do that, if you do run into a situation where, I guess at the outset of the conversation, you get the sense that this is not a good fit. I mean, have you run into those situations, and if so, how do you handle it at that point?
Oh, I have. And we say our goodbyes in a very respectful manner, and I don't reach out to them again. And it's okay.
Yeah.
And it's okay because you know what? One of the other things that I feel is problematic within our community, regardless of the type of photography that that person specializes in, is the fact that there's this scarcity mindset. Like, oh my God, I have to figure out how to make this work with this person because otherwise I'm never going to get hired. And the reality is there's plenty for everybody to go around, plenty to go around. As a result, why not try to zero in on the types of awesome people that love and respect what we do behind the camera as well as who we are behind the camera? It's just going to make for a far more successful shoot and a much more enjoyable time for everyone there.
How do you let them down in that, though? I mean, you said you go your ways amicably, politely, or whatever, but what does that conversation actually sound like? How do you say that to them?
Well, I'll get back to you.
Okay.
And then I've done the it's not a fit on the phone. No,
okay.
I'm not willing to do that. It's not a fit. I always just that's the go-to. And then sometimes it's I'll get back to you, and then we'll do the email. It's not a fit, depending upon what's going on in the call. Because at the end of the day, it isn't easy to say no. Especially at the very beginning of your photography journey when it's a little bit harder to come by work, right? But and I will say I've taken plenty of those gigs and I've regretted them afterwards, and I knew what I was walking into, and that's why now I'm much more steadfast in this approach of either it's a fit or it's not.
Fair enough. Okay. So I want to go back to then the three main sections of questions. The way that I wrote it down was number one, who are you? Number two, who do you serve? And number three, how do you solve your clients' problems? And by the way, I like this because I've never heard this framework from any photographer before. I've had brand photographers on the podcast a number of times at this point. I've never quite heard them frame it this way. So I love this perspective that you bring to the conversation. One of the things that you talked about under who are you is why they do what they do, what motivates them as individuals or as business owners or as brand managers. That's a really interesting question. And I'm curious, one, what kind of answers you get to that, but then how you translate that to the images.
That question is not necessarily geared towards me finding another piece to put in the shot list. That's a question for me to get to know who the human being in front of my camera is.
Okay.
And that's 100% why it's there.
That totally makes sense. So I guess this, because I was also, as looking through these notes, I'm trying to liken this as well, because I know we have other types of portrait photographers, wedding photographers, event photographers as well that listen to the show, not just brand photographers. I'm thinking about how this translates to them. And when we talk about getting to know our clients, a lot of photographers talk about the fact that that's important to them. But then I'd be curious to actually look at that questionnaire or their consultation process previous to the shoot, if it goes to this kind of depth. Because understanding what motivates somebody, I actually have a kanji, a Japanese kanji on the inside of my left wrist. It's kind of hard to see here on screen, but it's the Japanese word kakushin, or belief. And what I've realized in life is that very similar to motivation, there is a belief or set of beliefs. And I'm not talking about religious beliefs, just beliefs about the world in general, even down to I'm going to sit on a chair because I believe it holds me up, right? Beliefs drive the way that we behave on a day-to-day basis. So motivations, beliefs, understanding those things about these individuals that we're working with will help us get to know them at a depth that a lot of people don't tend to approach. So I love that you're doing that, not even specifically for the photographs, but just simply to be able to develop rapport, to be able to interact in a more, I guess, in a deeper way with these clients.
Yeah, and the thing about that question in particular, as well as a couple of other questions in that vein, is that it gives me ammunition in terms of keeping the dialogue going during the actual session itself, because I have intelligence to a deeper level on who they are, specifically during maybe during a little bit of a rough patch in the shoot, if they're feeling a little bit insecure in front of the camera, which I mean, it happens all the time,
Yeah,
right?
I
So when
still
you
am.
have, of course, and so am
Yeah.
I. I get weird. Come on. But the point being is that when you have that layer, that deep layer of understanding, that comes in very handy when they need the shoulder to cry on, and or they need the cheerleader to keep them motivated, and to remind them why they're in front of the camera, because
Hmm.
at the end of the day, the photos need to be flattering for them. There
Hmm.
is no doubt about that. Otherwise, they're not going to use them. But really, the photos aren't about them. It's about the people that they serve. And if you constantly put the kibosh on these photos, and you run away from cameras and you don't do the work, you are you're not allowing the people that need your help the most to be able to discover you through the content in which you serve. And you're not showing up in the photos in the way that you would show up in the room to be able to serve them. So as a
Okay.
result, all that stuff really ties in to be able to help them get back on track.
Well, then it's tied to something else that you mentioned under that "Who are you?" category of question, which is how are you perceived by your audience? Can you explain a little bit about I guess, the intention behind that question, how that also translates to the shoot?
Sure. The reason why I want to know how they want to be perceived by their audience is because it allows me the opportunity to have mile markers across the emotional spectrum. You see, when I'm shooting these folks, my goal is to create image content that conveys emotional sentiments across the spectrum, from vulnerability and introspection and all of that stuff, all the way up to and including joy, victory, happiness, all of that stuff. But when I ask the question about how they want to be perceived, or the aspects of their personality that they want to convey through their images, that helps to give me these little mile markers across the spectrum so that I know, yeah, I need to tap all the way from here to here. Yes, that goes without saying. However, I want to focus here, 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 and here, because these are the important ones that they want to use, and most likely those would be the ones that they use on the website and other major promotional pieces that they put out into the world.
That makes sense. So the way that translates for me anyway, I'm thinking about kind of, and I've certainly been guilty of just going into a shoot and trying to get a bunch of smiley pictures or it's something comparable, right? Kind of that default automatic mode.
Sure.
And what you're talking about is understanding what these clients want to communicate to their audience. And that enables you to be able to capture a range of images that represent those ideas that are most important to their brand as it relates to the audience.
Right. And the other thing about that is, every story that these people share is not sunshine and roses. They're not out there crushing it
Mm.
24/7.
Hmm.
And the clients, the stories that they share with their clients specifically, the teachable moments through storytelling, whether it's on video or it's photography and a written post or an article, you need to have images that visually punctuate the sentiment of those stories. You can't just put someone, popping balloons and throwing confetti in the air and doing the big fake laugh. There's a place for those. Not for all of my clients, but there's a place for that with
Yeah.
some people, right?
Yeah.
That's why we have the strategy call. I
Yeah.
mean, I've done that stuff before for some clients because that is deeply in line with their brand and their personality.
Hmm.
It's not for everyone, but when you're talking about creating a portfolio that actually has legs,
Hmm.
that has true value, you need to be able to account for those all of the stories that they share, whether it's copy on their website or on their blog or their online content.
I was photographed just a few days ago, actually, for a content shoot with another brand that we're in the process of launching. And there was one particular image of me that, our head of digital marketing, producer of the show, Jill, photographed of me. That's not me smiling. I have a pretty easy smile, and I like to laugh, and certainly that would be fitting of my personality, if you will. But this particular image was I saw it and I said, oh my goodness, that right now represents so accurately what it is that I'm focused on as an entrepreneur, which is the word intention. And the last thing that a lot of photographers, maybe even most photographers, would be thinking about when they're trying to capture the personality of somebody is the idea of intention. Like, how do you even translate that to a photograph, right? But starting with understanding that that's even at the root of this individual that you're photographing would at least begin the conversation that might enable something like that. If you didn't have that, you just go in and you just capture the, like you said, the dramatic laughing photos next to beautiful window light, holding a cup of coffee. Like, that's not everybody, and that's not what everybody is doing. And there's just way too much of that stuff out there. So I love that you're taking this approach. I think it's a really great example for our listeners.
I mean, I've done plenty of coffee cup shots, by the way.
Okay.
And listen, I'm not ashamed of it, and I won't besmirch it either, because
Okay.
the truth of the matter is I drink a lot of coffee, and I would want those photos for me, because that's what I do. But you don't want to contrive it. You don't want to force it on someone. Actually, I refer to my lifestyle sessions as contrived authenticity because, yeah, we're setting this up. This is not a live event. I shoot plenty of live events and masterminds and all of that, and there is no control there. That is in the moment stuff, fly on the wall. I want to convey that fly on the wall sense in the lifestyle portraits as well. And the way that you could do that is once you understand the personality piece and how they want to be perceived piece and why they do what they do and how they solve their problems, simply all you need to then do is create this authentic vibe while in a contrived scenario by simply allowing them to sit at the laptop the way they would normally sit at a laptop. What would you do with that coffee cup? How do you brainstorm your ideas with that pen and paper? How would you sit on that couch? I don't pose my clients. I allow them. I'm like, here's the scenario. Grab your notebook. There's the couch. What does it look like when you're there jamming out on notes? And, oh, I would do this. Yeah, and then you optimize a little bit for the camera angle as you're moving around. A little bit.
Optimize. I like that word, optimize. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, because if you just say, put your arm here and do this, or do the thing with the thing and the whoozy watts, it's all forced and it's written all over their face. But if you allow them to get into their own zone, they're going to have it all over their face. And then you direct them and it washes and paints that personality on their face. If you're looking for them to laugh, if you're looking them to be reflective, if you're looking them to just focus and do the thing, it's going to show up in those images.
Love it. That's perfect. Beautifully summed up. Okay. So first set of questions, category questions. Who are you? And I appreciate the additional context. Who do you serve? I guess really, honestly, both this and then the next section, how do you solve your clients' problems? I'm still curious yet again, how does this translate to how you're photographing? So let's take who do you serve first. When you ask that question, you're getting that context. How does that translate to the shoot?
So the who do you serve question allows me to understand the people that they're in front of, because then it gives me a little bit more information in terms of the logistics, in terms of the location. If they're working with business execs, what does that look like? It gives me an idea of what that looks like, right? And then once I have that basic, the who do you serve questions are very minimal. It's just, just tell me the industries, give me the basic gist, so I have a little bit of a background, right? The juice is in the how do you solve your clients' problems, because that's where, as I mentioned before, the business tentacles. That's when we know, whether or not they're using a whiteboard, they're working in a boardroom, they're working from home, they're doing virtual stuff, they're on the road speaking on stages. Then that translates to, well, how do I capture images that can be used in a way that aptly shows that activity to their audience? So when they talk about those activities and what they're doing, you have the images to visually punctuate the sentiments of those stories, while also not just telling them what they do. They're showing them what it looks like. And when you allow your audience the opportunity to see what it looks like to work with you, that helps demystify the process, and it helps give them an entry point into my clients' lives. And that helps create a faster process for them to make a buying decision. So all of these things are little incremental steps to be able to help get the person that's on the fence about thinking, is this person the one who I'm going to hire to help get me past what's holding me back or not? And that's why we're very particular about the types of questions that we ask so that we get all of the right activities and not just give them fluffy photos that really are vanity driven and pretty, but
Yeah.
there's no value on the back end. And that's
Mm.
what we want. We want value driven images that can be plugged in immediately into their online presence.
This has been really wonderful, John. Seriously, like it's simple, it's practical, highly applicable, and I know there's more to it. I want you to share a little bit more about some of the coaching that you do in just a second, but I want to kind of rewind just a little bit, go back to the beginning. You're a really easy guy to talk to. You have been since we jumped on the call earlier, so I can imagine that in and of itself helps your clients feel comfortable. But is there anything else in particular that you do, especially with those? And I understand you're asking these questions that gives you context to the depth of this person, but just on a simple surface level, even like the first 5 minutes that you get the opportunity to interact with them, is there something in particular, a few things that you're doing that helps them feel more comfortable on the other side of you?
Well, if they're feeling particularly not great in front of the camera, that's generally when I create a relatability moment for them. Because for the first 30 years of my life, I'm 44 now, I ran away from cameras. I hated pictures. I was overweight.
Mm,
Um, Overweight for a long time, and it made me very sad to be in front of a camera and see
mm.
these photos. And generally speaking, if you look at my family photos, there's photos of me like doing stuff like that.
Yeah, I get it.
So, yeah. So
By the way, I say
I
I get it. I understand. I was actually probably 40 pounds or so more than I weighed now as well. So there was a point in my life where I weighed way more than I should have. And I totally understand the kind of the apprehension that comes from that. Or at one point, I had a lot of gaps in my teeth. So I'm cognizant of that thing too. And now I'm going to get a camera pointed at me. And how do I mitigate what I'm uncomfortable with? It totally makes sense.
Yeah. And when you share that stuff with the people that are going through similar different issues, similar problem,
Mm,
that kind of allows us to have a little more of a connection together because they realize, listen, I'm giving you tough love right now. I'm not trying to tongue lash you or try to make you feel like you should not feel bad about yourself. It's like let's lean into what's bothering you and let's focus on how we can still create image content that's going to put you out in the world where you feel not only confident to share these images, but proud of the fact that you're in a position to actually hire someone like me to be able to serve the people that you serve and treat this more as a celebratory moment and not going to a funeral.
fair. But you know what? Even as I'm listening to you give me that response, I sense the empathy from you. And I know I mean, we're having a conversation on a podcast. I can imagine that probably even 5, 10x that those clients or potential clients are feeling that from you in the way that you're responding. You're showing empathy. Empathy is at the root of this whole thing. A lot of photographers I've noticed in our culture, in our photographic culture, in our industry in the last, I don't know, call it 6, 7, 8 years, maybe even a little bit more. There's kind of this, whether it's subtle or just straight up like out there, they're kind of obsessed with themselves. And there's a lot of conversation around introversion.
Yeah.
And in fact, speaking of the Richard Branson documentary, there's apparently he was quite introverted.
Yeah.
And his mom, and I can't remember the exact quote, I would pull it up, but she said to him, if you're nervous, if you're feeling introverted, it's because you're thinking about yourself. Stop thinking about yourself. Think
Yeah.
about the other person. And it really is amazing when, like, it's very easy and comfortable first world culture in 2023 to obsess about our issues. And as a result, we go inward and then we feel uncomfortable and then we obsess about how we feel uncomfortable. And then we just get this nasty snowball that happens. If we switch the focus outward and we focus on serving other people, leading with empathy and then serving other people, it's amazing how things change dramatically.
It does. Now, with that being said, it is still not that easy. It is a challenge. There's no doubt about that, to be able to put that to the side. But the reality is that's what you need to do. I mean, even in terms of a photographer showing up for a session where they've had a particularly or spectacularly crappy day prior to, or crappy couple of days, you need to be able to compartmentalize your own challenges, your own crap, basically, to be able to say, this person trusts me enough to pay me my premium rate. I need to deliver, over deliver, in fact, to be able to make sure that they never feel like they didn't get their money's worth, or even more so, because it is that important. And personally, for me, that is my mindset going in. I've had to compartmentalize quite a few calamities in my day right before sessions, and the
Mm,
reality is that it's also because it's a safe space, for us. It's a play space. It's a play space. I mean, we're
sure.
taking pictures for a living, so we need to respect the person in front of the camera enough to put our own stuff aside
Mm.
and be able to say it's about them right now. And that's essentially what I'm conveying to my clients when they're going through the rough patch, when they're looking at themselves.
I love that. I love that. Well, I know that we're kind of scratching the surface. There is a lot more. I mean, you talked about the fact that even your questionnaire has 30 different questions. So there's more to this conversation. You're a great teacher. I have to give you props for that. And I wonder if you just share briefly a little bit more about, and by the way, for our audience, John didn't ask me to do this. I have respect for what John's offering here. So will you just share briefly about the kind of the coaching and consulting that you do for photographers?
Yeah, and thank you for bringing it up. I do appreciate that. The course is, it's a 16-week training. It's called Deliver Magic. And basically right now, the way that it's currently constituted is geared towards teaching photographers, particularly portrait photographers, or brand photographers. I refer to myself as a lifestyle portrait photographer, but Deliver Magic is a course where you're going to learn the strategy behind creating better results for your clients through creating a better experience. Essentially, what we've just been talking about the whole time. And it's broken up into a couple of different modules with some videos, and then we have some homework, some shooting, some questions. And ultimately, what it is bring a community of really talented photographers together to be able to create better work, just better work.
Fair enough. Well, we're going to link to all. And by the way, for anybody who is not watching the live stream, I just pulled up John's site as he was talking here. If you go to John DeMato, DEMATO.com / deliver dash magic. And of course, we'll link to this in the show notes at bokehpodcast.com. But you can learn more about that education and help that John can offer. And of course, we'll link to all your other social media and your website in general, John, in the show notes at bokehpodcast.com. I really appreciate you being willing to do this today. We're all about practical content, actionable content, and you brought that. Truly appreciate your time and sharing with our community.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.